The first time I unlocked the front door to my shop alone, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit on the floor and breathe. Not from fear, though there was some of that, but from the weight of realizing that this place existed because I didn't give up when it would have been easier to disappear. The shop was small, one narrow room with a front window that caught the afternoon sun, shelves I'd assembled myself, and a counter that still smelled faintly of fresh wood. I ran my fingers along it like it was something alive. I remember whispering we did it even though there was no one else there. In my heart, though, my family was there with me. I was the kind of daughter who believed love meant inclusion. If something good happened to me, I assumed it belonged to all of us. My parents had always spoken in we. We sacrificed, we struggled, we raised you right. So when I built this business from late nights, savings jars, and quiet tears, I believed it was another shared victory. Mine, yes, but rooted in them. At Sunday dinners, they asked about the shop. My mother smiled proudly when I described new customers. My father nodded, calculating in that quiet way of his, though I mistook it for concern. My younger brother teased me for working too much. My sister listened with a look I couldn't read, but I didn't question it. I didn't question much back then. I was gentle. I believed the best of people because it made the world feel safer. The business grew slowly, honestly. No sudden success stories, just consistency, regulars who learned my name, suppliers who trusted my word. Mornings where I unlocked the door with steadier hands than the first day. I learned how to breathe through setbacks, how to sit with disappointment without letting it harden me. I learned patience. What I didn't learn, at least not yet, was how quietly people can make plans around your life without ever intending to ask permission. The first sign came as a joke. You know, my aunt laughed once over coffee. If you ever sold this place, you'd make a nice chunk. I smiled politely. I don't plan to sell, she shrugged. Everything has a price. It sounded harmless, casual. I didn't notice how my mother went quiet after that, how my father's eyes lingered on me just a second too long. I didn't notice because I was still living inside trust, and trust makes you soft in places you don't know need protecting. At night, when I locked up the shop, I felt proud in a quiet way. I wasn't flashy. I didn't post about success. I just went home tired and content, believing I was building something solid, not just for myself, but as proof that I was doing life right. I thought my family saw that. When my parents started asking more questions about revenue, about leases, about long-term plans, I answered openly. Why wouldn't I? They were my parents. They'd taught me honesty. They'd taught me family comes first. I didn't hear the shift in their tone. I didn't see how curiosity slowly turned into expectation, how my business stopped being my work and became an asset in their conversations. I remember one evening clearly. My mother said almost absent-mindedly, you know, sometimes things are meant to help the whole family. I nodded, smiling, unaware that in her mind a future had already been decided. I went to bed that night thinking I was loved. I woke up weeks later realizing love, when mixed with entitlement, can quietly change shape, long before it ever raises its voice. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It slipped into my life in pieces, like cold air through a window I didn't know was open. It began with a conversation that stopped when I entered the room. I had come early to my parents' house one afternoon, keys still warm in my hand, my mind full of inventory lists and invoices. Their voices floated from the kitchen, my mother's soft but urgent, my father's low and firm. When I stepped inside, they went quiet. Too quiet. My mother turned and smiled too quickly. Did you hear something? She asked. I shook my head even though I had. A word, just one, amount. I told myself it was nothing. Families talk about money all the time, don't they? I kissed her cheek, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down. The room felt different, though tighter. Like I was suddenly standing in a place where something important had already been decided without me. The questions came later, careful at first. So, my father said one evening, folding his napkin with unnecessary precision, "Have you ever thought about where you see the business in, say, 5 years?" I answered honestly. Growth, stability, maybe one day, a second location slowly, thoughtfully. He nodded, but his eyes didn't light up the way they used to. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've done so well," she said. "We're just so proud." Pride can feel warm. It can also feel heavy, though I didn't yet know why. The real fracture appeared through someone else's mouth. It was my cousin, careless and loud, the kind of person who never noticed when he crossed lines because he didn't see lines at all. "Hey," he said one afternoon, leaning against my counter while I rang up a customer. "So when is the big sale happening?" I laughed, assuming he was joking. "What sale?" He frowned. "The business. Didn't your parents tell you?" The shop felt suddenly too small. The hum of the fridge grew louder. My hands froze over the register. "Tell me what?" I asked. He blinked, confused now. "That you're selling, to help them out. They already promised the money to someone." The word promised landed like something breaking inside my chest. I closed the register slowly, aware of how calm I sounded. "Promised who?" He hesitated. I thought you knew." I didn't hear the rest of what he said. My body was already somewhere else, backtracking through weeks of conversations, through smiles that lingered too long, through questions that weren't curiosity at all. That evening I drove to my parents' house in silence, no music, no rehearsed speeches, just a growing stillness I didn't recognize yet. I asked them directly. My father sighed, as if I had inconvenienced him. My mother avoided my eyes. "We assumed you'd understand," she said finally. "It's family." That word again, family. They explained it like it was already done. How someone needed help. How the money would solve everything. How I was young, adaptable, capable of starting over. "You can always build another business," my father said, "but this opportunity won't come again." I listened without interrupting. I felt like I was watching strangers speak using my parents' voices. "You didn't ask me," I said quietly. My mother reached for my arm. "We didn't think we needed to." That was the moment something in me went very still. It wasn't anger. It was the slow, aching realization that the people who taught me consent, respect, and honesty had rewritten those rules when it suited them. They hadn't seen my business as my life's work. They had seen it as theirs to spend. I left without raising my voice. Without slamming a door, I walked out carrying something much heavier than disappointment. I carried the understanding that betrayal doesn't always shout. Sometimes it smiles, explains itself gently, and expects gratitude in return. After that night, I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't try to make them understand. I went quiet. At first, my silence frightened me. I had always believed that love was proven through effort, through explanations, through patience, through staying at the table long enough for everyone to feel heard. But this time, every sentence I imagined saying felt like it would shrink me, so I let the quiet stay. Days passed, then weeks. I returned to my routines like someone relearning how to walk. I opened the shop each morning, brewed the same coffee, greeted the same customers. On the outside, nothing had changed. On the inside, I was watching everything with new eyes. My phone buzzed often. Messages from my mother, carefully worded. "We're just worried about you. You don't have to do this alone. You know we only want what's best." What they never wrote was "I'm sorry." My father called once. His voice was controlled, almost formal. "We need to talk like adults," he said. I nearly laughed. Adults ask before they decide someone else's future. "I'm listening," I replied and meant it, but I didn't fill the silence when he ran out of justifications. I let his words sit where they belonged. Silence, I learned, is uncomfortable for people who are used to being obeyed. At the shop, something inside me began to settle. I noticed details I had once rushed past, the way a regular customer waited patiently while I helped someone else, the quiet pride of balancing my accounts honestly, the satisfaction of locking the door at night knowing everything inside existed because I protected it. I wasn't just defending a business anymore. I was defending myself. The guilt came in waves, years of being the good daughter. Don't disappear overnight. I questioned myself constantly. Am I selfish? Am I overreacting? Is this what independence costs? But then I remembered my mother's voice saying, we didn't think we needed to ask. And the guilt loosened its grip. I stopped sharing details, no more numbers, no more plans. When my family asked about the shop, I answered kindly and vaguely. They noticed, of course they did. You're pulling away. My sister accused one evening. I looked at her calmly. I'm standing still. She didn't understand the difference. That wasn't my responsibility anymore. The more silent I became, the louder their frustration grew. They weren't angry because I had refused, at least not only that. They were angry because I had changed the rules without announcing it. They were used to my availability. I was learning the power of restraint. One night, alone in the shop after closing, I sat on the floor like I had on opening day. The same room, the same shelves, but I wasn't the same woman. I realized then that strength doesn't always feel like confidence. Sometimes it feels like choosing not to explain yourself to people who already decided who you should be. I wasn't cold. I wasn't cruel. I was clear, and clarity, I discovered, is peaceful, but it also comes with loss. I grieved the family I thought I had, the version of love that respected my autonomy. That grief deserved space, not distraction. So I gave it space. I let silence do its work, because in the quiet, I finally heard my own voice, not desperate, not defensive, but steady. And for the first time, I trusted it. The final change didn't come with an argument or a dramatic decision. It arrived quietly, like understanding often does when you've stopped trying to be understood. One afternoon, months after everything had fractured, my mother asked to meet me for coffee. Her message was short, careful. I agreed not because I felt obligated, but because I felt ready. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. We spoke about neutral things at first, the weather, an old neighbor, the taste of the coffee. I noticed how she avoided certain topics, how she waited for me to guide the conversation. Finally, she said, "Things have been difficult." I nodded. "I know." She hesitated. "We didn't expect you to hold your ground." There it was, not an apology, an observation. "I didn't expect to need to," I replied gently. She looked at me then, really looked. I think she saw for the first time that I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I wasn't angry. I was simply no longer available for sacrifice. "We thought you'd understand," she said again, softer this time. "I do," I said. "I understand that you made plans without me, and I understand why I can't allow that anymore." My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just nodded, slowly, as if something heavy had finally settled into place. That was the moment I realized something important. Closure doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means clarity. The consequences unfolded naturally after that. The promised money never came. The problem it was meant to solve had to be faced honestly. There were uncomfortable conversations, ones I wasn't part of. My absence forced reality to speak where I once would have softened it. I wasn't asked again. At the shop, life continued steady, imperfect, real. I hired part-time help. I said no to things that drained me and yes to things that didn't need justification. I learned how to rest without guilt, how to succeed quietly. Sometimes my family reached out, sometimes they didn't. Our relationship changed shape, and I let it. I stopped measuring love by access and started measuring it by respect. One evening, as I closed the shop and turned the sign to closed, I paused. The street was calm. The air was cool. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace, not the fragile kind that depends on everyone's approval, but the solid kind that comes from self-trust. I didn't win anything. I didn't prove anyone wrong. I simply chose myself, and that choice echoed in ways I didn't need to witness to believe. I learned that boundaries don't destroy families. Entitlement does, and silence, when used with intention, can be the most honest language we have. I built something small, and in protecting it, I finally built something even stronger. A life where my worth wasn't negotiable, and my love no longer came at the cost of myself.